Welcome back. My first guest, is always, my all-star leadoff hitter, Luke Jones, is joining us live, somewhat live. I got a full disclosure here, right? Luke, welcome in.
How are you, Dennis? It's great to talk to you as we get to every week. I always look forward to this.
Same here, my friend. Life is good. I know we want to talk some O's and some Ravens, but I saw a blurb on ESPN this morning. Monty Williams, is it? Um, $12 million. I'm sorry, $68 million contract. No, $72 million contract for 6 years to coach the Detroit Pistons. 13 million a
Wow.
year. $13 million a year. I should have stuck with coaching, Luke. My high school football coach, I said, listen, I want to follow your path. I want to be a gym teacher, a phys ed major. He said, son, you'll have a good life. You'll have your summers off, but you'll never be rich. Uh, don't know about that. Coaches, Luke, are getting paid handsomely with the four pillars of sports that are, of course, MLB, NFL, hockey, and basketball.
No question about it. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we always talk about this at the college level, right? And obviously, NIL has changed the dynamics there. But, at the pro level, it's been fascinating to kind of see where player salaries have gone in, coinciding with how much coaches make. And especially a sport like the NBA, where it's very much a player
Yeah.
first league. It's a player driven league. We've seen that countless times now with super teams and players, even being under contract for multiple years and requesting a trade, and they get their wish. I mean that's kind of how the
Amazing.
NBA has played out. So, you see a contract like that, and hey, the 76ers just hired Nick Nurse, who, I
Right.
haven't. I'll be honest, I've been busy with Orioles and Ravens coverage to see how much he's making, but I guarantee you he's going to be paid
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
handsomely
Monty
to
Williams,
try to figure.
yeah, it's 6 years, 78.5 million, Luke, for accuracy. It's 13 million a year.
and
That's not
and you know
bad.
what's no doubt, but what's
I
funny
mean,
about that is that's
nobody dies. They're
still
not saving lives.
way less than players are making.
I mean, come on now. I mean, they're not saving lives. They're not telling a family, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Surgery didn't go well. I mean, it's insane. Look, God bless them. I'm glad they're getting paid, but the money is insane.
It is, but what I will always tell people, and I agree, look, in a perfect world, doctors, nurses, teachers,
Right.
first responders, those are the professions that would be paid to a lucrative degree. But as I do point out to people, it's market driven. The NBA, just like Hollywood or television, whatever it is, it's lucrative
Mhm.
business. And what I will always tell people is it can go to the coach in this case, or players, or while the owners can pocket more of that money. So which would you rather have it? In that case, that's where my perspective on it changes a little bit. But it is crazy, again, because I talk about this with Nestor from time to time, and I talk about this with just friends in my own life, that you kind of step back and you think, and this is true for any of us. I mean, the same thing's true for talking about this, writing about this for my livelihood, that inherently, if people aren't there to watch or to read or to consume or to be invested in it, it has no value. It's the same thing for athletes and coaches. I mean, if it's entertainment, and it's
Right.
big business kind of entertainment, it's lucrative entertainment, but
Mm.
ultimately it comes down to dribbling a basketball or throwing a football or swinging a baseball bat or swinging a golf club. If people don't want to watch that in person or on TV, then there's no value to it. So it is wild, though, when you step back and you kind of remember where things were 10 years ago or 30 years ago compared to where they are today. But as I said, the money's being made by someone. I'd rather see it go to coaches and players, more so than owners just solely pocketing the money and billionaires becoming even richer alone.
Well, I had a young man many years ago by the name of Anthony Robinson. He a salesperson for me. His father was actually one of my managers there, and he was making six figures as a 20-year-old, but he wanted to get into the NFL. So he called Eric DaCosta. It's a true story. He kept calling Eric and said, "What do I need to do?" And Eric said, "Well, we won't talk to you unless you get a college degree." So he went to Morgan State, got his degree, became one of those 2020 guys for Eric, and worked his way up through the ranks. He was the assistant GM for the Atlanta Falcons. He just got another job with the Titans. I think he's director of personnel or something like that. He's doing very, very well, but he gave up a six-figure income as a 20-year-old to pursue his NFL dream, and he made it. And he'll be a GM one day. I mean, he's got GM written all over him. But man, oh man, I tell you what, it just and I'm happy for him.
It's awesome. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, you always hear stories like that where people have, some roundabout paths as far as their career or just their life in general. I mean, that's obviously a big part of his life, but you know, you always I always found, and as I get older, this just, crystallizes even more that it's kind of wild when you're first out of high school and you're kind of tasked with the idea of, okay, what do I want to do for the rest of my
Yep.
life? And it's like, how
Right.
can anyone really know? I mean, you have designs, you have dreams, obviously, but until you actually experience it, until you're in that part of your
Sure.
life where you're starting to do that, actually, it really does become, kind of a, it's intimidating to be 17 years old and someone asked you, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Because think how many things you know now that at 17
Uh,
you thought you knew, but you had no idea. So, but an example like that, I think it really does kind of identify how important it is to have passion in life. And, you know, money is part of that. You have to make a living, you have to support yourself,
yep.
support your family, all those different things, but still important to have passion in your life at the end of the day. And an example like that one is a great one to hear.
It is. It's a wonderful example. Um, NBA Finals are upon us, right? I don't know how much of it you watched. I watched quite a bit of it as the Celtics try to make a comeback against the Heat and lost the first three, won the next three, and then they lose at home. You talk about the Sixers having a letdown. Celtics were the number two seed, I believe, and again, the Miami Heat and Spoelstra and give them all the credit in the world. Now they're in the finals against the Nuggets.
No question about it. And you just mentioned Eric Spoelstra. I've had this conversation probably with three different people over the last couple of weeks as Miami's made their run. I mean, this was a play-in team, right? I mean, this was a team that was so close to being done. And what they did in the first round, knocking out the top seed in Milwaukee, and
Yeah,
I mean, disposing of the Knicks wasn't surprising. I fully expected that, but for them to do what they did against the Celtics, I mean, it's just been,
crazy.
it was just incredible. And, me being a 76ers fan, as you know, seeing Jimmy Butler do what he's done, it
Jimmy
just
buckets, baby. Yeah.
makes me just,
Ah,
it just makes me, it pains me to think that the
that guy.
76ers chose Ben Simmons and Brett Brown over Jimmy Butler a few years back.
Yeah,
And
the bad move in
neither of
retrospect.
those guys are with, yeah. So it's tough,
Yeah,
but it hasn't just been Jimmy Butler. I mean, how about what Caleb Martin's done? I mean, just
unbelievable. He's no longer a
incredible
secret,
what
is he?
he's done. Right, right. I mean, and I saw quite a few people, and it'd be tough to disagree. As terrific as Jimmy Butler was, and has been throughout this postseason, I think Martin was
No,
kind of MVP of the Eastern Conference Finals.
he
So
was.
they're going to be a big underdog against Denver, and understandably so. But I mean, it is fun, and I have no idea what the ratings will look like. I don't really even care about that, but
The
it
NBA
is fun
cares.
to kind of have
The
this.
NBA cares. That's for sure, right? That they didn't want to see this matchup, right? They didn't want to see Denver in the first place, but now you got Miami and Denver. Hardcore fans will be watching for sure, and maybe some casual fans as well.
Right, right. I mean, it's definitely not going to be a monster from a
Hey,
rating standpoint, but
Lakers Celtics, right? That would have been a monster matchup in regards to ratings.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. But you do have Jokic, he
Oh
who
yeah,
is just
yeah.
an amazing player, and I mean, Jimmy Butler has been such an impressive, incredible postseason player for a number of years now. That it'll be fun. I mean, Denver should be the favorite here, and then we'll see how it plays out. But I mean, it's Miami's been on a heck of a run here, and it's been fun to watch. And uh, you know, as someone who's gotten back into the NBA over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm certainly looking forward to catching as much of it as I can while acknowledging the Orioles and yes, even the Ravens this time of year keeping me pretty busy.
Yeah, let's talk about the Orioles. Their offense kind of well fell asleep there for a few games, and then the offense came back, and then the pitching kind of became more suspect. So again, I guess something you would expect in a 163 game season.
Yeah, I think with the Orioles this week, and I'm working on this at BaltimorePositive.com right now. Look, I mean, they're coming off of a really impressive month of May. All we talked about at the end of April was, hey, the Orioles are off to a good start, but it's kind of been the soft underbelly of the first half of their schedule. Lots of losing teams, hasn't really been an imposing gauntlet that they've gone through. We'll see how they do in May. And they had a winning month. We talked about what happened with the 6-game stretch with Atlanta and Tampa Bay, and then they go on the road trip against Toronto and the Yankees, which you and I talked about at length last week. But this last homestand, I do think was a little bit of a warning shot, and I don't mean panic. I don't mean I think the Orioles are going to collapse. I don't mean any of that. However, I think we're at a point now, and look, everyone's been so excited because of the surprise of this, but we're now getting to the point where we're coming up on a calendar year since the Orioles started playing at a much higher winning clip. Go back to last July. This is really when they took off, and then we saw how fun the second half was last year. But I think how we saw this last week play out, and not just because they went 2-4, a 2-4 6-game stretch. Every single team in baseball is going to have that multiple times over the course of a season. So it's not just that, but it's finding out the news of John Means having, the muscle strain in his upper back that's going to delay his return from Tommy John surgery. Finding out that Dylan Tate has a little bit of a stress reaction in his elbow that's going to delay his return to help out the bullpen. It's Grayson Rodriguez getting shelled on Friday night, then sent back to AAA Norfolk. It's Cedric Mullins getting hurt on Monday with the groin injury that has him on the IL. And even if he's not going to miss the rest of the season, but guessing he's probably going to miss some time here and might be closer to the All-Star break by the time we see him back. If we're being realistic and you're trying to be cautious about someone who relies on his speed so much, the point is seeing that coupled with just how this team has played. Let's face it. I mean, we're talking about a club that has played 56 games this year, and 50 of them have been decided by 4 or fewer runs. They have put so much strain on not just their bullpen, but their best bullpen arms. And what we saw in the series finale against Cleveland on Wednesday was a case where their middle relief was exposed a little bit. They're struggling there. Cionel Perez has not been the same as he was last year. Michael Givens has not looked right coming off of the IL. I don't know how much of that is the knee, and I don't know how much of that is, hey, he's older, and sometimes relievers just get to a point where they're not as effective anymore. We've seen the ups and downs for Austin Voth and Mike Baumann and guys of that nature. So I kind of look at this thing, and that's not to say that the Orioles are going to, or a collapse is imminent. I'm not suggesting that at all, but even as you're going through this, and even as they've been winning, I think it's been easy to recognize how they've been winning games and what kind of fatigue that can put on your best bullpen arms. So, as I see the Orioles right now, one of two things needs to happen. They either need to start getting a little bit more length from their starting pitching, or they need to fortify their bullpen depth. And that might be as simple as turning to a couple guys in the minor leagues guys that are pitching at AAA Norfolk right now and adding them to the bullpen and kind of, mixing and matching a little bit and do some shuffling there. But I think, for me, that kind of the big picture takeaway of the last week is not just that, because that's something we were talking about even when they were rolling and continuing to win games at a high level. They just play a lot of close games, and that can be tough, right? And that also means when you're playing close games, you're going to lose close games too. I mean, that's just how it works. The NFL is the same way. Look at teams over time, what their record tends to be in one-score games or games that are decided by 3 or fewer points. Even the best teams aren't going to win all of those, right? I mean, that's just kind of how it works. So you have that. But for me, to me, it really signals to Mike Elias and more so ownership, probably more than anything else, is don't be complacent with where this club is as we get closer to the trade deadline. And we're still 2 months out, and a lot can happen between now and then. But don't be complacent and don't view this as, oh, well, this is a lot of fun and this team's just only going to get better. Improvement's not always linear in that way. And, the idea of a 5-year plan that culminates with winning a World Series, the Ravens are a great example of this. Look where they were with Lamar Jackson in his second season, and they were 14-2 and record-setting and unanimous MVP, and what, they sent 13 guys to the Pro Bowl that year and all of that. They haven't sniffed being quite that successful from a regular season standpoint, certainly, but they haven't gotten past the divisional round. So my point is, strike while the iron is hot. That does not mean I'm suggesting that the Orioles trade away Jackson Holiday for a rental pitcher at the trade deadline. I am not saying do that. I am not saying that trade away your entire farm system. However, if you have some meaningful opportunities to improve your club for this season, and even better if it's someone you can add that will help you in future seasons, by all means, do that. Take on salary. Be willing to part with some prospects if the right guy comes along to add, because I think this week with Grayson Rodriguez, we were all had such high hopes for him this year. And look, I'm not giving up on Grayson Rodriguez by any stretch of the imagination, but we've seen how that's played out. John Means, you hope he's back in August. If he does come back in August, is he going to be John Means, though? Cedric Mullins, a great example of you can have one of your best players go down, and that changes everything. The Ravens know that all too well the last couple of years. So the point is, I want them to feel the proper amount of urgency to go out and make this club better if the opportunities present themselves here over the next couple months, and not just to say, hey, we're doing better than we thought. That's good enough. That's not the end goal here. The end goal here is to put yourself in position to be better over the second half of the season. And, they have every opportunity to do that. And let's be clear, they have other players that they can call up. And, you have someone like a Gunnar Henderson, for example, who hasn't had a great start to the season, but we know what kind of upside he has. So that's not at all suggesting that I think that the Orioles are in trouble. I want to be clear. Anyone listening right now, I'm not down on the Orioles, but I do think the last week was a warning, a little bit of a warning shot to say, hey, things can go sideways and things don't always go according to plan. So if you have a chance to get better, don't squander that, because there's no guarantee that they're just automatically going to be better next year and automatically going to be better the year after that. Injuries occur, and bad luck and tough scheduling and all kinds of different factors are at work here that, frankly, some of them completely out of your control. So my point is not to just settle for, this is a fun season. They've got the third best record in baseball starting this this road trip that starts in San Francisco over the weekend. So seize this opportunity. Again, don't do anything foolish. I'm not saying trade Jackson Holiday. I think Jackson Holiday has a chance to be in Baltimore by the second half of next year, the way he's going. That's how impressive this kid has looked in the minors. So I'm not saying do something stupid, but at the same time, don't be too satisfied with where you are right now. That's to me what the takeaway from this last homestand, where you had some injury luck, bad luck. You had some unexpected demotion of Grayson Rodriguez because of just how up and down he's been, and they lost a couple series. No shame losing to the Texas Rangers because of how well they've played this year, 2 out of 3, but losing 2 out of 3 to Cleveland, a Guardians offense that came into Baltimore among the very worst in baseball, and to see them put up the runs that they did, a little bit of a sign of, I don't know if it's bullpen fatigue as much as you're just relying on your bullpen so much, and that middle relief has been shakier than the Orioles needed to be. They needed to, they need some better production out of some of those guys in the middle part of that bullpen. And, if we're not going to see some turnaround and rapid improvement from some of those guys, I think some changes are going to be warranted.
No, I'm with you. Look, I think you make great points. Back in 2019, for instance, I thought the Ravens had perhaps arrived a year early. I thought that was the beginning. Certainly not what we saw thereafter with the injuries and everything else that happened. But you're right. When these windows open up, you've got to take full advantage of them. Do all you can to enhance them and make them better. All-star voting has started, Luke. Some of the Orioles that do you think will bear serious consideration for the All-Star team at this point?
I think obviously you begin with Adley Rutschman. He's played at such a high level this year. I think you're seeing him garner more and more praise and recognition around the league. I fully expect, even if he's not the starting catcher, because we know it comes down to voting. Fully expect to see him. I would have said Cedric Mullins had a really, at least a shot. But obviously now with the groin injury, you would kind of think that's probably not going to happen. Beyond that, I mean, Austin Hayes, I want to give him recognition that he's had a terrific season.
Sure.
Has it been all-star worthy? I think that, that might be a bit much to say that, but I think you have to look at Felix Bautista and Yennier Cano. Cano is a setup man, and typically you're not going to see a setup man make the all-star game unless it's a really bad team that needs their one all-star rep, and which the Orioles obviously don't fit that category. But yeah, I think you look at Bautista, even if he's had some of his hiccups here, and we've seen him at times maybe not command the splitter as much as you'd like to see. But look at his numbers. He has 14 saves already, and figure he's going to continue to pile up saves because, my goodness, it's all the Orioles do is play close games. So you have that, and he remarkably, Dennis, is averaging 18 strikeouts per 9 innings. He is averaging 2 strikeouts per inning, which is just silly. I mean, that's absolute silliness to do that. So I think Felix Bautista has a good shot. Even if he's blown a few saves, he's got a good shot to be on that all-star team because, I mean, what he's done is just remarkable. Again, 18 strikeouts per 9 innings. Typically you look at a reliever, and if he's averaging 10, 11, 12 strikeouts per 9 innings, you're saying, wow, that guy misses a lot of bats. But I mean, Felix Bautista has just been remarkable in that way. So, I think for me, those are the guys you're kind of looking to right now. And, I think Adley Rutschman feels like the safest bet, but I think Felix Bautista is the other one. But like I said, if not for the injury with Cedric Mullins, not saying he would have made it, but he's certainly someone that was garnering at least some consideration for that. But I think you're going to be looking at Rutschman and Felix Bautista, at least as it stands now at the beginning of June, having the best shot for the Orioles.
All right, look, let's segue over to the NFL. Every day I look for my Ravens fix, my Ravens news. Not a whole lot happening. Not a whole lot of news, at least, coming out of the castle. What do you have on the platter for us in terms of current Ravens events?
Yeah, well, I mean, Ravens OTAs, they're in the midst of week 2 of OTAs, one more week after that, and then they'll have mandatory mini camps. So, the spring, off-season spring program is rapidly continuing, if not winding down at this point. And obviously they'll have their break then, but Thursday is an open OTA day, and we're scheduled to hear from Mark Andrews, and Patrick Queen also scheduled for the podium. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say. And I would imagine just the fact that he was willing to talk to media and be cooperative with the PR staff, I think he's going to have the proper perspective as far as where things stand for him. So, but it nonetheless will be interesting to hear what his reaction is to Trenton Simpson, and knowing what that kind of means for his future with the Ravens, as we kind of all expect this to kind of be it for Patrick Queen and probably get a nice contract elsewhere, which is great for him, and that's not something for him to be disappointed about. So, but we'll see how that plays out. But obviously attendance is something that you're always paying attention to. Sure. For these OTAs. And, last week, I think the most, I just mentioned Patrick Queen, probably for me, the absence that or the status that I'm paying attention to now, since Lamar Jackson is there and participating, might be, we're J.K. Dobbins. And look, not saying that it's an issue that he's not there for OTAs, but as I always say, when you have those players that are in a contract year, or, there's been some disenchantment at some point in time, and we know J.K. Dobbins was not happy with his usage late last year. He made that evident after the loss to Cincinnati. He's someone that you're at least paying attention to his status, and you say, okay, well, where is his mind right now? Not about having a great season. I fully expect him to be ready to go, but in terms of his level of happiness, or that lack thereof with the Ravens, that's I'm not suggesting that there is disenchantment, but I think you at least wonder, right? I mean, you always have to wonder, in the same way that we wondered last year when Lamar Jackson wasn't there. So just curious to see if J.K. Dobbins is there taking part this week. But beyond that, just, you're observing, as I say to you all the time, Dennis, this time of year, observations are fun, but they're far from the end all be all. I mean, it's just, these aren't overly competitive practices. There's no threat of contact, which always makes a big difference as guys are practicing in helmet shells and shorts. So, I think we're just continuing to see Todd Monken install his offense, and again, nothing you can take away to any dramatic degree. For one, we're not allowed to really report on formations and things of that nature, but
Right.
they're still very much in the learning phase right now. It's not just the players learning the offense, but it's Todd Monken learning the personnel, and this process that starts in May with OTAs and will continue all through training camp in the preseason is figuring out, what does Lamar Jackson do best? What does this offensive line do best? What routes and concepts do these wide receivers fully do at the highest level? All those different things you're trying to find out, because you cast a wide net with your offensive system, but then you get to a point where you kind of hone in on what you do best and you kind of focus on those things. And it's not to say you become predictable, but you have to figure out what you're going to do best. And especially when you're talking about a new offense early in a season, you're going to lean on the things that you do best and then hope that that grows over time. So, it's very much a learning experience for everyone right now. So that doesn't necessarily lead to the most exciting practices and OTA observations, but that's really what matters more so than, oh, so-and-so made a catch for X number of yards or so-and-so caught a touchdown. And that's fun. And I do that with my 12 Ravens thoughts at BaltimorePositive.com, but I'm not the only person that could tell you of countless players over the years that impress this time of year,
Sure.
impress in training camp, and then disappear after that. So as long as we keep that in mind, then hey, the observations and discussion and all that stuff this time of year is lots of fun, because hey, earlier this week, we were under 100 days now until the start of the regular season. So
Wow.
I'm not wishing the summer away, especially with an Orioles season that is so exciting and meaningful, but football will be here before we know it.
Yeah, there's no question about that. There's always the OTA darling, the mini camp darling, the undrafted free agent that makes a splash. You're Bobby Rainey, so I'm curious to see who this year's version of Bobby Rainey is. But you talked about Patrick Queen. Yeah, like you expect him to be politically correct when he gets up there. And he has to recognize the Ravens would love to re-sign him, but they just don't have unlimited funds. I was a bit surprised, and again, I recognize too that sometimes sound bites, sound clips don't tell the whole story. But I was a bit surprised to hear Chuck Clark sounding off with his experience in Baltimore. I thought they were good to him, but again, I didn't hear the entire presser, so I don't know if that was just a sound bite to make it whatever. Um, but look, Kyle Hamilton wasn't supposed to be there when they picked,
Yeah.
and he was, and he was supposed to be a top 3, top 5 player, and you can't blame the Ravens for making a business decision, because Clark, although he was a great leader and a very smart guy, he did have some physical limitations. I remember when he came out of college, he talked about he had stiff hips, and his they didn't think they thought his ceiling was a special teams player. So he outplayed his draft position, but still, the Ravens, and you can't blame them, they made a business decision.
Yeah, I don't blame either party here. And I really didn't take any issue with anything he had to say either. I think it comes down to this. I mean, the reality is Chuck Clark stepped in 2019 when Tony Jefferson tore up his knee and played at a high level. He was an upgrade over Jefferson for a fraction of the cost. Now, at the time, that offseason then, he signed a new contract. It was a very team-friendly deal. And look, him being a former, sixth round pick,
Yes,
I didn't blame him at all for gaining some financial security at that point in time that you didn't have on a 6th-round rookie contract. So, that was the right move for him at the time. But considering how much he had played, I mean, this is a guy who played every snap for them the last couple of years. That got to the point where he was, he outplayed that contract as far as
he did.
what he was worth to the Ravens. My understanding is there had been some, and I don't think it ever necessarily was formal, but they at least had some informal dialogue early last offseason about an extension, about him making a little bit more money. That happens with lots of players, and I don't want to say
Sure.
that the Ravens promised him anything or anything like that, but they sign Marcus Williams, they draft Kyle Hamilton, and then if you're Chuck Clark, you're saying, well, what the heck?
Right.
I've been a really good soldier here for below market of what I was really worth. And we talked a little bit about an extension. And then you guys just added 2 safeties. Well, the writing's on the wall for me. I don't blame
Right.
him. Of course he wanted to be traded. So but I'll say, he requested a trade. Obviously, it didn't work out, but he was there last spring for workouts. He was there for OTAs. He was there for mandatory
100%.
minicamp. He was there for training camp. He was fully bought in, even if he was ticked off all year long, even if he was, and I don't know if he was or
100%.
not, but based on how he spoke recently in Jets camp, it leads you to believe that. But he was a total pro, so I have no problem whatsoever with what he expressed. And this is where and I'm not suggesting that you were bringing it up from a fan perspective, but so many times when fans react to this, you have to remember fans come at this from a position of you've either been a lifelong Ravens fan or you've been a Ravens fan since 1996, right? Chuck Clark is not a lifelong Ravens fan. Chuck Clark, this is his job. This is his livelihood.
Right.
Think about being at a place where you wanted to make more money. You talk to your boss about it. You have some dialogue, and then your boss brings in 2 other guys to,
Sure.
to take on your responsibilities, and you're suddenly in a position where you say, well, do you even want me anymore? So, I think if you think about it from that context, I think I didn't have any issue with what Chuck Clark had to say. And if he feels slightly disrespected about it, then it was just the circumstances of it. And that's fine. And to be clear, the Ravens made a business decision too, but he made one as well, wanting to be traded and wanting out then. So I have no issue with it. Chuck Clark was always a pro, a stand-up guy, a guy that was willing to talk to media after tough losses the last few years, which I cannot say about other unnamed members of the locker room, which that's going to happen. So I have full respect for Chuck Clark. I wish him well. I don't think the Ravens will miss him dramatically from an on-field performance standpoint. However, from a leadership standpoint, and we've talked about this with Calais Campbell, Marcus Peters is another one. You do have to fill that void with some other guys. And that's not to say they won't, but that's just something to consider when you move on from a veteran player like that. But nothing but positives to say about Chuck Clark. And, as 6th-round picks go, easily one of the best 6th-round picks in Ravens history, which sounds like a backhanded compliment, if you were talking about most teams, but look at some of the 6th-round picks that the Ravens have had over the years.
Sure.
That's Adalys Thomas being one of them that just comes, off the top of my head. Chuck Clark, he had a good run here, and I wish him well in New York.
He did. And the final thing for you, Luke, today is that he talked about Todd Monken being in there, installing his new offense, learning the players learning him, etc. He'll look at the entire squad with a fresh set of eyeballs, which is something that Mike McDonald did last year on the defensive side of the ball. So now he's ahead of the curve, right? McDonald is second year with his defense. He's installed it. The players know it. I'm expecting the defense to pick up really right where they left off. They probably still have a couple more moves to make, whether it's Justin Houston or Marcus Peters or whoever. But I do think that having that stability with a second-year coordinator bodes well for the defense going forward.
No question about it. And I'm in agreement with you. That's why, I know fans have gotten excited about the possibility of DeAndre Hopkins, and I'll never say never, right? Because I never would have thought that Odell Beckham was going to get $15 million from the Ravens. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no way. However, when I look at this roster, I look at their biggest needs at this point. You just said it. A veteran edge rusher, whether it's a situational guy or whether it's a guy that plays a little bit more than just being a situational 3rd down rusher, and another member of the secondary. I think it's important to point out, and this kind of slides right into what you were just saying about Mike McDonald. I think what we've seen and what we saw over the second half of last season, maybe we need to think a little bit differently about the nickel spot. We're so long and used to seeing just a corner playing that nickel spot, and with Kyle Hamilton playing that the second half of last year, and how much better the defense was with him there compared to some of the young corners that they tried out there with mixed results in the first half of the season. I think, I would not dismiss the possibility of adding another safety. However, even if you do that, then you're still running into the issue of your outside corner depth. Right now, Marlon Humphrey, great. Rock Yassin, great. Those are your projected starters at this point. But after that, you're talking about guys like Jalen Armour-Davis and Caillou Blue-Kelly. You're talking about completely unproven outside corner depth. So I do feel that there's another move to be made there, whether it's Marcus Peters, which, I'd be interested to see what the fit is there if he's not playing as much and how open and receptive he is to that.
Mhm.
So, whether it's him or whether it's someone else, whether it's, and I'm not saying this would be the only move, but how about someone like a Kyle Fuller coming back? I mean, that could be possible if he's healthy, and obviously that's a big if, and he's coming off of an ACL, but that's where I look at that. But to go back to what you were saying about Mike Macdonald in general, yeah, I think that's going to help them a lot. I think he probably learned a lot about himself as a defensive coordinator. Again, it was one thing to do that at Michigan in the Big Ten. It's another thing to do that against NFL offenses. So I think the players are going to be more comfortable with him. He's going to be more comfortable with the personnel and what he's doing as a coordinator. And yeah, I still think there's a move or two to be made. And I think they have the cap space and the flexibility to, move some money around and do those things without it being terribly consequential to the big picture from a cap standpoint. But, I think the potential is there for this defense to be a really high level defense. I'm not saying it's going to be 2000 Ravens great. I don't know if there any defense is going to be that great in this day and age, but I think the way we saw this defense play at the end of last season, understanding they've lost some pieces here. I mean, Calais Campbell's a loss,
Yeah,
not
of
saying that
course.
I would have paid him $7 million guaranteed, but that's a loss. You're going to have to fill that void. And you hope that some other guys are ready to step up. And you hope Michael Pierce is healthy and not that he does the same, has the same responsibilities, but you hope that that's part of the solution there in terms of filling that void. You've got some questions at edge, lots of upside, but hey, the time's now for Odafe Owe. This is, I think he's on the proverbial hot seat a little bit this year. Not that I'm saying his roster spot's in jeopardy, but hey, now's the time. Year 3, first round pick. You either need to show that you're going to be that guy, or you're just going to be a guy.
Right.
In that mix. So, David Ajabo, you love the upside, and obviously last year was a glorified redshirt year for him. But still think you need a veteran there. Whether it's Justin Houston, who I think is a solid, that would be a reasonable bet for him to come back. I'm not saying it's it's far from a guarantee because, it sounds like he's garnered some interest elsewhere, but I know he liked his time here. So, I think a move there and another move in the secondary between now and the start of the season. And I'm not saying these are elite, dramatic moves that they're making, but moves to fortify their depth. And I think you do that, then to me, you're feeling as good about the defense as you're feeling about the potential of the offense with all the new pieces in place on that side of the ball.
Great stuff as always, Luke. Please tell our listeners all the great stuff you do at BaltimorePositive.net, WNST, your blog, and all the other stuff that you're involved with.
Absolutely. I encourage everyone to follow us on Twitter at WNST. You can follow me personally at Baltimore Luke. Check out my blog at BaltimorePositive.com, sponsored by Coons Ford of Baltimore. The latest on the Ravens, 12 Ravens thoughts from the second week of OTAs. I'll have my thoughts on the Orioles as they conclude the month of May and they begin the month of June out west against the San Francisco Giants over the weekend. But check out my blog at BaltimorePositive.com. You want to be on the WNST Baltimore Positive Tech Service, sponsored by Coons Ford of Baltimore. If you are, you got the news about Cedric Mullins, unfortunately, going to the IL and the Orioles signing veteran, former Yankee, Aaron Hicks to replace him and hopefully give them some contributions, although his career has not been on a good path over the last few years. But any significant local sports news sent directly to your mobile device via the WNST Baltimore Positive Tech Service, sponsored by Coons Ford of Baltimore. And of course, anything throughout the week on AM 1570 with Nestor. Ravens and Orioles sound, whether we're talking about OTAs or Orioles sound from the ballpark pre and post game. Check out all of that at BaltimorePositive.com.
All right, my friend, I appreciate you. You enjoy the rest of the week, the weekend, and we'll have more to talk about for certain next week. And the sports world is always changing. Things are always happening very, very quickly.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, Dennis. Have a great weekend, and we'll reconvene next week.
You got to stay well, my friend. There he goes, Luke Jones here, 1570 AM, Baltimore Positive. WNST will take a quick break and come back right after this.